It's March 6, 2022. Welcome to The Truth as We Know It. Joining us today from Louisville, Kentucky are Stephen Smith, Paul Moffett, and David Vislisel. And from Atlanta, Georgia, Stanley Hitron. I want to get right into the topic here, which is values and conflict resolution of values. And this is something that I listed. These were some questions, and what I'd like for you to do is just look at the questions, and I'd like to hear from each of you about your personal experience. It's one thing to talk about this in the abstract, but a specific example of how you've dealt with what you would think would be a conflict of values, and kind of describe that experience to us. And to begin, this flows out of the article that Steve had referenced, and I just wanted to define these terms of unresolvable, irresolvable, and intractable. And it may seem like a distinction without a lot of difference, but I think it's important to, particularly on the first two, something that's not able to be resolved and something that is impossible to resolve. And I think they're making the distinction there is an important aspect of this, that if you feel like something is impossible to resolve, then it seems like a waste of time to put any effort into conflict resolution. But if it is unresolvable, well, it means we are not able to do so. Maybe we need intervention or mediation of some sort. Intractable, on the other hand, I see as it's a little vague in a way, but it refers more to a deep-rooted conviction, perhaps a very strong religious belief, or something that you would not even consider changing. It's not that it couldn't change; it's just, it becomes a total. So the first question is, if you're thinking of a conflict of values that you've had with someone you know, perhaps someone in the family, it could be a person or even a group of people, what was the nature, what was your relationship to those people, and how much life experience had you shared with them? In other words, are these conflicts and values more likely to appear with people you know well, or people with whom you share very little? Steve, since you initiated this, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd like to have you kick this off. Have you thought of a specific example?
I know our values conflicted, but maybe there was an easy walk-away solution to this one. But I'm going to bring it up anyway, just to show how things can happen. To answer your question, Michael, about who you would have value conflicts with, I think if you're in some kind of formal business relationship or political relationship, you might have these. But casual relationships with people that you don't know well, I think we just tend to avoid the conflict issues. But with family or friends or people that you know well, it gets hard over time to totally avoid such conflicts. The one I'm going to talk about is one I had with a friend, longtime friend, over dinner a few years ago, when Matt Bevin was running for governor of Kentucky, and I guess the election hadn't come up yet, but it was election season and he was doing campaigning. And I thought he was a terrible choice for governor of Kentucky. And I said so. And my friend said, "Oh, no, I think he's a good choice. He'd be good for business." And we went back and forth on it, got a little bit heated, but really it turned out that his values and mine, what was important to me and what was important to him, were just different. He valued the positive effect it might have on the business community to have somebody like Matt Bevin go in and get rid of regulations. And I was concerned more about community values, how well people in our community most in need of support and help would be treated. I'm trying to remember what the exact issues were, but I think there had things to do with Medicaid coverage and things like that that Matt Bevin was trying to cut way back on. What was at the heart of the disagreement?
Before you go there, I'd like to kind of go around to sort of introduce these first. But
sure.
A question for you is what was your relationship with this person before? Were you generally on the same wavelength, and then this issue with Bevin came up and it sort of surprised you?
Yes, it did surprise me very much. I guess I assumed that his outlook on political things was closer to mine, but in fact, on many other issues, we get along well, and so the relationship remains good, with the understanding now. I'm not so surprised that we have a difference of view on where our political leadership should go and what they should stand for, and in those areas, we continue to disagree, but we tend not to talk about it as much.
Dave, let me go to you next. A specific example, just someone or some group or what have you that you've had what you felt to be a conflict of values?
My story is Michael knows that I was in prison education work for a long time, as he was for a good while. Originally, when I went into corrections work, there was a clear, undisputable position that security, correctional officers, and that staff, the police system within the reformatory, always, in every case, had precedence over anything that we social and educational suppliers would have. It bettered over time with a couple of very good commissioners, but it seemed to moderate somewhat over the years, and that meant that what they called treatment staff were on more equal basis or rising basis compared to the military, the guards, the security systems. So my conflict was it was all an enclosed school, library, inmates law office, inmates library. There were sex offender treatment programs going on in rooms that it was just kind of a crazy mishmash of these areas that you could close doors off on, but it was kind of a grand central station in many ways, plus an open classroom. So there were difficulties. Well, in that time, as I say, I became the school director, including over the vocational technical schools, as well as the academic programs, including college and career training, higher education. There were programs. There were a couple of them that were coming in at that time. So the conflict became, I was responsible for the operations in that school, in that building. I was the go-to person as the manager, in addition to my work as school principal or ed director and the like. This conflict arose out of what I mentioned at the beginning, the predominance or the supreme control of the police force over any of us at any level. There was little problem because usually, I could meet, work it out. I would be informed on what was going on if there was something, but this particular lieutenant had a tendency to come in off, say nothing, go in, close things down, and I was there not being informed, not understanding, and the like. And, you know, it was once, twice, but then the shit hit the fan, so to speak, when he rolled in with several officers that just took over everything. And I finally had had enough. I always argued with them, but the conflict became, and I took it to the warden, saying, you know, this is not right. We have advanced too far along here, and it's disturbing in the order of things, especially in a place that's supposed to be this is about inmates' education, inmates' services,
Right.
and so on. Sure, they're down by law, but you know, that's way too much. So I went to the warden.
Dave, before you go on with with the description of how this resolved itself, what was your relationship with this lieutenant before? Had you known him before you went back?
Oh, yeah. You know,
so someone you knew for some time.
You simply knew sergeants, officers, lieutenants. As you know, it was similar, very similar to the reformatory days. We worked together in many cases, but things had. What I wanted to portray is things had kind of smoothed out. So treatment staff were seen more comparable to that. Okay. So before you go on. It was not a personal relationship. It was simply a relationship of he has his job, I have mine, and we would work together on issues and so on.
So your prior relationship was there were no conflicts prior to this one.
There were some minor issues that, you know, I could tell that he was a law and order, you know, it's my way or the highway kind of guy. And, you know, sometimes it was very appropriate, sometimes not. But, you know, but this was a big incident in which he just, you know, overwhelmed everybody and locked everybody.
So you didn't have much of a relationship with the guy outside of this situation.
No.
He was not a friend or anything. I kind of want to lay the groundwork for this before we get into a discussion of the specifics of the disagreement and what was at stake. Paul, let me ask you, do you have an example of an issue where you felt like there was a conflict of values?
Yeah, actually the current one at this point not completely resolved. You know, I think it's kind of booted off, and that really has to do with the group that Michael and I have been a part of for many, many years. And a couple of guys in this group have decided that they're going to organize the group and tell us all what we're, you know, how to talk, where we speak, where we don't speak, who gets to turn it around, to the point that we were like, enough of that, you know, don't need anybody to teach me to do that stuff. I learned that a long time ago. And so that's unresolved at this point. I think, as I saw one of the guys that's involved in this on Wednesday at the Raven.
Yeah.
And we spoke. Now, I'm not going to put any names in here. We don't really need to talk about who this was, and it still is. I'm not quite sure how to deal with it. Part of me just says, you know, if it gets to be a problem, I'll just say, you know, I'm going to go home. Bye.
Would you classify that as unresolvable or irresolvable? Is it just not something we can work out now, or is it just it's done, it's impossible?
Oh, it's not something we can work out here, but you know, it would be interesting to see for what everybody else thinks about how you would go at this problem, because these are long-standing relationships here.
Right. Yeah.
Really long. I mean, you know, we're 20, 30 years. And yet it's to the point where it's like, you know, one of these guys, I'd like to tear his head off. He tries to tell me I have 5 more minutes to talk.
one more part of resolution. Okay, it's interesting you picked my my topic there. Stan, I've come to you last mainly so you could hear something from these guys and get to know a little bit about their perspective and so forth. Do you have something to share with us along these lines?
Sure, be glad to. Um, this is probably too global to and too deeply rooted in deep psychology, but my basic conflict is with a brother whose basic political orientation is very different than mine. And I come from a family of 8, and there were 6 of us siblings, and we each of us had to share a bedroom, and I shared a bedroom with this brother. So the conflict started probably when we were like 7 or 8. It's been ongoing since then. Some of the conflicts were just different, it's little things that happen when you live with somebody whose way of living is different than yours. But anyway, so the conflicts with my brother, it's over our political positions. And I try to, I'm a person who likes to avoid conflict. And so I try to figure out a way to resolve things, or try to, smooth things over, or just avoid them. But he likes to bait me. Like something pisses him off. He's watching Fox News or something, and something pisses him off. So he'll send me a text, something like, "And you want to be with this party that's destroying democracy, i.e. the Democrat," just out of the blue. I'm getting ready to go to bed. I get this text from him accusing me of supporting a anti-democratic Democratic Party. And so anyway,
before you go ahead.
I think the value, his basic values are, he says I'm a fiscal conservative, and I'm socially, I'm more liberal. And he's more liberal socially, but he likes to bait me. He likes to, there's something that there's this need in him to best me, to own me, to own my liberal, my liberal mentality. And I too often rise to the bait, probably for other deeper psychological reasons. And I have tried in the past to find common ground by saying, let's read an article together, or let's read this book together, or and like if he says such and such is so and so, and I'll find evidence, and he says, "Oh, that's a liberal publication, you can't believe them." That's his fallback. Anything he doesn't like, that's a liberal publication, and it's not true. So I've tried to get him to read studies. I don't have time to read. I'm working. I don't have time to read this stuff. So it seems to me he doesn't really want to resolve this. He wants to own me as a bleeding heart liberal. And but in terms of family, we get along. As long as it's family, as long as it's we get along fine. We share the same family values. We feel it's important to support our siblings, and to be there for them, and if anybody in our family was in bed, we'd both be there. So we share these family values, but it's this political stuff. But I really think there's something psychological going on there. I'm not a psychologist. I only play one on TV, but there's something deeper going on. Some grievance that he has with me, that he needs to do this so that he can feel less aggrieved. That's
without getting too personal with family issues. Were there conflicts that were non-political that followed the same pattern? Did you have issues over?
I was a hippie and he was a fraternity guy. I was a silly. I was just, and he was. He called in college. He called women fuck bags, and I took exception to that. So he's really a nice guy, though. Been married, loves his wife dearly. But
family they're particularly difficult because you can't just ignore them and go away. They're
I've tried. I felt like the way I felt like we could resolve some of our political issues if we would sit down with the same text and then each read it and talk about what that text says to us. But otherwise, we're just arguing these generalizations that may or may not be provable. It's not a substantive debate.
Yeah.
It's I got you, no, I got you,
Yeah.
I got you, And so I really don't think he wants to talk about things substantively. He just wants to show me how wrong I am. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Mhm.
in that case, it's irreconcilable. So we'll just, talk about dinner and
Yeah.
talk about, I don't know, joke about stuff, and it'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Well,
Stan.
this is interesting. We had a kind of a wide variety of conflicts, whether you're dealing with family or friends or groups you belong to. It's interesting. We take kind of a different slant. Paul, as I said, I was going to focus on the same thing, and it's I don't want to repeat everything Paul was saying, but basically, Paul and I belong to a men's group that met weekly for 25 years, 30 years, I guess.
40 years.
I was a relatively new member of the group. And one of the things about the group that seemed to be a point of pride was that they were disorganized. They didn't want to have any rules. They didn't want to have anybody in charge. It wanted to be this very egalitarian gathering. And I had problems with that in the sense that I'd like to know what's going on. I'd like to know what the parameters are. I'm not looking for power over the group. I'm just saying, what's the deal? I feel like I guess maybe because I played a lot of team sports when I was growing up, that you want to know, who's calling the play. You can't just sit in the huddle and argue all the time. Somebody has to, take lead. You can take turns taking the lead, but that's a problem for me. And when we went to Zoom meetings with this group, I had particular problems because there's not just one, but one member in particular. I timed him one time. He spoke for 25 minutes without stopping in this kind of setting. And that's not fair, and yet there was no rule that I could appeal to. So that's mine here.
Structure, Mike, is that what you're saying? You wanted to see a little structure in the group, and
an agreement, and just an agreement of protocol. Here's how we're going to do this. But it was never. You couldn't make a rule because there was no rule about making rules. There was no initial contract or compact to pull the group together. So. I find this fascinating. I share these things with each of you. The next question I was pointing to was, what's the heart of the disagreement, and was it based on indoctrination or personal experience? I think we may have covered a bit of that, but if Steve, if I can come back to you, you said your disagreement was about a political candidate. Had you experienced other political discussions with this friend and suddenly this came out of the blue, or did you have disagreements prior to this?
Yeah, I don't think we had discussed it. There were periods where I didn't get to see him very frequently, and so when we did get together, it was more catching up on what's going on with our lives, our careers, our families. And we just didn't get into politics very much. No, I hadn't really had much in the way of conflicts before this one. And as I think about it, it seems to me he was going with the value of individual responsibility and individuals, making their own way. If you're an adult, you're an individual and make your own way in the world. And I was going with, there are a lot of people who need help, who can't make it on their own. They need some sort of help. And, I think individual responsibility is good too. I'm not opposed to that. But in this particular case of this candidate for office, I wanted to hear more about what he was going to do for the citizens more broadly. Mm-hmm. And all I heard was knocking down things that existed, and some of those I thought, in terms of regulations or controls, were appropriate to be there to begin with. So, as far as the Matt Bevin, the politician, I just thought his policy were very wrongheaded, and my friend just saw it a different way. Yeah. He was taking it in terms of, individuals got to make their own way, and government regulation should get out of the way.
Did you think that he was basing his disagreement with you over his personal experience or some doctrine that he accepted from someone else? I put in here indoctrination versus experience, and was, if he said it's a matter of personal responsibility, was that based on his individual personal observation of people, or was it, Fox News or something?
Well, I would, I don't think I'd like to introduce indoctrination versus personal experience as a dichotomy that we would use, because I think a lot of people are if they're making decisions based on their values, look where their values came from. Was their upbringing, their education, their career, their life experience. And, in some cases they get false information that goes into their thinking and their judgments. But when we're really talking about their values, I think we're talking about what they see as important, not whether indoctrination seems to me that people are getting facts fed to them that aren't necessarily true facts.
I may use the wrong term there. I didn't intend it as a pejorative. It's indoctrination being a story you're told, a set of things that you're being presented with as factual. And our culture, our religion, our education, our professions, there's stories in all of those. Right.
And to say exactly which one, it would be hard to say. I think it's I can see the result. I can't exactly see how, how that result was formed, how that value was formed in the other person, but I can see where his value could differ from mine. And I didn't see, somewhat like Stan's brother talking to him, if you argue some, then the other person is just going to dismiss your point of view as being informed by the liberal press or informed by Fox News, and you don't really get to, well, what's important to you?
Yeah.
And so if I was trying to resolve this problem in a different way with him, I think, having thought about these value conflicts a little bit more, I think I would have tried to get down to, there are a number of places where you can get values. Sometimes if the source, let's say, is your family upbringing, that's one set of values, whereas your religious education or your political point of view comes from a different source, and sometimes they're in conflict. So you're going to put some values as a higher priority than others. And what are the ones that we have in common? Do we have any in common? I bet we do.
Yeah. Dave, I was going to extend the question to you in terms of, and I don't know what word to substitute for indoctrination, but it was more, here's what we should do in the prison with these prisoners. Is this because I'm a lieutenant, I've had experience here that you haven't had? Or was it more abstract in saying, well, I don't think this is correct? Was both his response and your response based on your personal observation, or was it more of I'd say a theory perhaps rather than an indoctrination?
Well, before that, Mike, I understand the indoctrination versus experience thing, and I would want to speak to that briefly. But the question before that, the heart of the disagreement, even the founder of the corrections professional who Luther Luckett Correctional Complex is named after, and that is Luther Luckett,
right,
said, I'd like to create a prison in which social programs, educational programs are places that an inmate down by law, having to follow the regulations of being in prison and all of that, can go into, and almost literally forget about those issues of being prisoners. It was, he wanted to open education to, you've got to be comfortable, you've got to be accepted, you've got to have honest relationships. And, you know, I think education was the by far and away the best rehab approach that could be had. Part of it was that in social and psychological situations, therapies and so on, and almost every other instance, you are being controlled by or manipulated by, they're getting at your values and your attitudes and your deepest sins, if you want, and all that. That wasn't true in education. That's what made it so marvelous. It was about something else that didn't involve necessarily much of your emotional life or your emotional problems in it. That said, the heart of the disagreement was that this guy and the brass, and you know, they were indoctrinated, but so was I, by the rules and regs, and we did repeats and repeats. They were very stringent training approaches on, you know, the primary thing is these people got to be kept locked up, kept safe from escape, and to the extent we can, keep them from harming each other. You know, that if that's the primary thing, then this guy rolled in, and it wasn't the first time, as I say, but this is a big one where he locked things down and disruption, got everybody riled up through the whole building. And that was the heart of the disagreement. It was how he did it. Their Gestapo break and enter tactics. And I argued with him about that. I said, you know, there's a way we can do this. How about we try this together? How about we calm everybody down? That was the heart of the disagreement. It was the methodology rather than, I think they had got a rumor that somebody had some drugs in there. And so in they come like crazy. So that was the heart of the dispute. And I eventually took it to the warden. And I said, you know, we got to find ways to work together on this. There's got to be a way that maybe one of our treatment people and one of their security people can go in together and say, because that was my responsibility too, to keep law and order, I broke up a couple of fights in the building. There was all pretty congested and so on. I shouldn't have done that by their laws, but everything was very cut and dried that way. So the warden said, I said, is there a way we can discuss this? Is there a way we can get together and we can come to some kind of a compromise on how we do this? And the warden turned me down. He wasn't mad about it. He wasn't ferocious about it, but it's what led to my departure from that place about 6 months later. That was the big issue for me. In terms of indoctrination, he was certainly indoctrinated through the rules and the regulations. And probably it's also a part of his experience is that if you go in quickly and you wrestle them down, then you're not going to have any problems. So I would say that in the answer to that question, Michael, it was a combination of the two. Yeah. In my case, some of them may have been ego. You know, I'm the boss. What the hell are you coming in here and running circles around me and so on? You know, and I wouldn't deny that was a little bit of involvement, but it was really the disruption of the peace in that place, and he was responsible for how he did it.
Yeah, I have a kind of a personal experience relating to that. For those who don't know, I used to be a trainer with the Department of Corrections, and in our training sessions with new correctional officers, we always presented them with the problem of, are prisoners here as punishment or for punishment? In other words, is the incarceration the punishment, or should they suffer while they're incarcerated? And that's the punishment. There are some people who object to having services for inmates, like allowing them to have televisions and allowing them to have recreational programs. They think, well, you're a prisoner. You don't deserve that. You deserve to be punished. And others say, no, they're here. They're being denied their freedom and denied their contact with their friends and family. That's the punishment. Now, while they're here, let's try to, condition them so that they go out as productive citizens and not as experienced criminals. So there's a conflict. So it sounds to me like you and this guy are on opposite. We never resolved that, by the way. In our training, we never said, no, it's this or that. We presented our students with the open question, and we wanted them to think about it. Because if you come down on one side or the other, and you don't recognize the fact that there is this yin and yang going on, you tend to block the communication. That at least you should be able to, he should be able to explain his security needs, and you should be able to explain your educational needs. So I think that's an interesting one.
You said that really well, but the overall philosophy all through those years, maybe not in the earliest years, but through the civilized years, I'd say, the Joe Cannon and David Bland and they were both wonderful people, and they created a new atmosphere, you might say, in there, I thought, or they were working hard to create it. So, but they're there because of what they've done. They're not there to be punished, is the philosophy of corrections, and technically always was. Mm-hmm. It's not to make them suffer a little extra and so on. So that's where I might differ with you a bit.
Paul, let's get back to your example. Is this? I was talking about the same subject, so maybe we can share this. That my contention was the problem was there was no inherent structure in the group. What do you think is the underlying cause of the issue that you were expressing about the men's group?
Well, it's kind of interesting because part of that has to do with the fact that it has shrunk considerably. Yeah. Not very many people show up. And so one or two people will have a little bit more power over how we're going to organize all this kind of thing. I don't think this group is particularly inclined. Well, you said it, Michael. There was, most of the time we didn't want anybody to tell us what to do. We just came in, had a beer, talked about whatever came to mind, talked about this, talked about that. And we weren't really in the business of trying to establish some facts or attitudes, because everybody in this group pretty much agreed about on the politics, to be sure. Politics were good. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer for you really, because I don't want to. I'm personally inclined to tell everybody, we're going to do this next week. And what we find, and people setting that up in this group, next week nothing happens. Nobody does anything. Nobody gets together to send this out or send that out. There's one guy who's kind of a little bit about sending that out, but he's got a Down's child, so he can't really be there all the time. So I don't have an answer for that. That's why I said I even brought this up, because it's like, it has been in this group for 40 years where we've dealt with this issue. And in the early days, what would happen would be one or two people say, well, okay, we're going to go do this. We're going to have, we're going to all go to Otter Creek, okay, next month. And we're organizing, you do this and you do that. And we just organize it, because that's kind of what needed to happen. And we had some very nice times doing that. But the meetings themselves, nobody really wanted to always be the same. Certainly I didn't want it always to be the same thing. I'm not, I'm in class, you got to talk about this. I've done that, and that's okay. But it's likely not that. I think of myself in this particular group as like being the most faithful guy. I'm there, or have been for a very long time. The one guy who showed up all the time, and so, and yet I did not tell people, here's what I would like you to do.
Like, say That's 90% of life is just showing up. Right?
Showing up, that's right. And, tell us what's
Yeah.
going on with you, how's life treating you. And we've had to, but, sometimes it's really just being warm and friendly to your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not really a conflict. This is an unresolved problem at this point. It obviously can be resolved in some fashion, although I haven't made it, personally haven't decided how I should go at it.
It takes a lot of effort to resolve it, and sometimes you wonder whether it's worth the effort. Stan, let me come back to you. I want to respect our time here and maybe get in terms of this conflict. I have a similar issue with a brother who's we're on opposite sides of things politically, but we also like to fish. So we go out fishing together, and we used to play golf together and things like that. Is your relationship multifaceted in that way? And
there's not much we could do together. I don't play golf. He plays golf. I don't belong to a country club. He does. He likes to go on cruises. I like to hike in the mountains. I mean, we're just totally opposite.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of, and like a lot of times when the family's getting together, we'll all be talking and stuff, and he'll disappear into his man cave. He just won't be engaged. But anyway, I think the basic value difference between us is in terms of, I kind of believe that I believe in a commonwealth. I believe that people should be able to live together in justice. And I believe that there are problems in the system, whereas he would think, if there's a problem, it's because everybody's free and they can do what they want. And if there's a problem, it's because they're not doing enough to take advantage of what's there for them. And I say, well, I think the system is flawed in many ways and needs to be reformed. But, so that's the basic conflict. Rugged individualism versus let's have a commonwealth where people are given opportunities, but they share in things anyway. Yeah. And I don't know that. I think that I think one of the problems is, while I'm ready to be sincere and frank with him, he sort of wants to keep his distance. He doesn't want to get too intimate with me, which is interesting. There's something about intimacy that he's afraid of.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, I want to respect everybody's time today.
I need to go too. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I don't know if you have something else you'd like to add today. The final question was about how you would do it differently. If very briefly, if you have something there, Steve, let me start with you. I know you have to go, Stan. Let me start with you since you've got to go. Well, any way you would change the dynamic?
If I had to do differently, I would try to be more patient and listen and hear him out. But my fear is that he's a better rhetorician than I am. He's better at arguing. He's better at coming up with the zingers than I am. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of like defend against that by, not keeping him quiet. Anyway, but I think if I could listen better and not be a little more relaxed about having to have a comeback or whatever, I think, just let him talk himself out. As much as it's so much shit, just let him talk and then go, well, okay.
That's hard. I understand.
It's very hard. Yeah. Anyway, that's it, guys. It was really great meeting all of you. I'm sorry that I can't stay longer, but I'm looking forward to seeing more of you guys and engaging in this. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for being here.
Bye-bye.
Right, say hello to Emily for me.
Thank you. I will.
Steve, what about it? Is with your friend, is there a strategy that you might take if you could go back in time to change the dynamic?
Yeah, I think rather than going directly to that issue, going to the issue of, do you vote for this guy or not? I would like to find out a little bit more about the values, because I think we share many values. And I think if I could get him to open up a little bit more about how his values inform his political point of view, we might find something where we're a little more common ground.
Dave, is there If you could look back in time, is there a way to avoid the confrontation that you might have taken? The road, the road not taken here?
Here's the crux of the problem, I think, or how I would do it differently today. And it's informed some by some meditation and Buddhist experiences and practice I've had since then. I don't think there would have been any use to continue with the lieutenant, because he was adamant. He had his job. That's the way he understood it. I can go where I want. I do it. It's got to be done quickly or not, you know. So I did try a little of that, but I don't think that would have been the way to do it. The warden was a friend of mine over several years. You know how that kind of happens sometime when you're middle management, and it's a long time, and you know, they were maybe grew up with you in the prison system, as many of us did. I would be more patient with him. I would have said, well, you know, you say it can't be done. You're siding with the lieutenant. Why? Explore the whys, explore the possibilities of maybe sitting down together, hostage resolution or whatever. That's what I think I would have tried a little more, rather than gone out saying, well, thanks for nothing. or thanks for your useless time. Or I said something pretty frank, maybe not that strong.
No,
but you know, sometimes you got to know when it's time to go.
Yeah.
And I think by then I had better offers, and actually central office is where I went. I thought, you know, it's good for leadership and people to move on sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, you get too used to the
rather than just continuing to bump heads. Paul, is there a way we could have avoided our current dilemma with the group? You thought of giving any thought to that?
Well, I was thinking about it. Since you brought it up, I think that fundamentally, when I think about the beginning of it, it was really because there was a bunch of people who weren't from here. And that was
from Louisville.
People who were not from Louisville.
Right.
And a bunch of them who were here from Kent School. So we get Kent School stirred into this, and that's where things happened, was at Kent School, and people came out of that union to set stuff up based on what they had learned, and so that's kind of what happened there, at least in my book, and it stayed that way for a long time. So it sort of became a habit just to have this reference in mind about Kent School and how people interact with one another. But over time, it just slowly weared away. And so that's really what happened, was erosion. Yeah. Ground it down. And yeah, so that, I wish I could give you an answer, but I'm not sure. At this point, I'm more thinking, well, can it be resurrected at all?
No. Well, there's always hope.
That's what I think.
I want to thank you all. This was very interesting today. You know, one of the things that moves me to do this is I think it's important for people in our age group to contemplate what wisdom we may have gathered over the years.